Welcome everyone. We're sitting right now at City Hall in Mayor John Tory's office. This is the first time the mayor has ever done a Facebook Live interview, and we're very glad to have him. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Just letting you know that as we're doing this chat, you can still ask us your questions. I'm going to try to take as many of them as I can. I'm going to get them here on my phone, and I'm going to ask them to the mayor. It's been a pretty busy term so far. We're approaching the midterm, and we've done a lot of different policy topics at council so far. There's actually some news this week. Earlier, the mayor announced that we're going to try to build a 21-acre rail deck park over part of the rail corridor. This is something that what didn't come from the campaign came as a suggestion of staff. It's something that you're putting your name on. Why don't we start there? That's something brand new. Can you tell us a little bit about that project and why you're supporting it?
Well, on the why part, it's fairly easy because one thing I did inherit when I got here was a huge amount of development, both actually done and planned. And when you saw the numbers, which I didn't sort of focus on before I got here, of how many people have moved downtown and how little parkland they have access to relative to other people all over the rest of the city, the entire rest of the city, you realize we had to do something. And you have a solution which says you can buy little pieces here and there and create these kind of parkettes, but it's not the same. You know, you can't have the same kind of just feeling of being in a park and having your kids running around and having a picnic or whatever. And so we took an idea that had been talked about at various points in time before and started to proceed to actually do something about it. And so we had some preliminary discussions with the railways because it's their land and their air rights, and just start to put some flesh on those bones now, which will culminate in a report coming to the City Executive Committee in September. And I just think it's necessary for proper city planning and city building that we do this so that we can properly have those people who live downtown, which are increasing in number, have a livable place to be. They don't have a front and backyard, they live in condo buildings. So I think it's very exciting, and you know, there's a bit of controversy that's come up now, people in the suburbs saying we shouldn't do it, and other people saying it should be bigger. I think that's great. Everybody's talking about it, and maybe if we can, we will make it bigger. But for now, let's start with the 21 acres and get that done. That'd be a great start.
It's been a pretty busy summer in the city so far. We've seen a lot of road work, construction, a few interruptions and issues with TTC. Can you just comment on sort of the influx? We've seen a lot of complaints. We've got a lot of questions coming in from readers about delays on TTC, delays on the road.
I really think the TTC staff are doing a good job of improving the reliability, and I base that not just on my good feelings about it, but on looking at their statistics. And their statistics show that while there are interruptions from time to time, and if you look at what causes them, medical emergencies, nobody controls that. Equipment failure, they're trying to cut down on that, and some of the new money coming from the federal government is going to help us to keep these vehicles in an even better state of repairs. So I think really our biggest problem isn't so much with that as it is with just an overall lack of capacity. And then we have to improve the capacity. I mean, the complaints on the Yonge Street subway have less to do with delays, which do happen from time to time, and more to do with the fact that people let 3 trains pass by. They're forced to let 3 trains pass by because they can't get on. And so that's why we're trying to build so much transit in a 15-year plan that covers large parts of the city to improve the capacity, because we took decades off without building any. And I don't know why that was done, but it just was. And now we're going to make up for lost time.
Let's just stay on that for a second. There's been a bit of a back and forth about the TTC budget. We've seen the TTC's CEO say that some of the suggested cuts is a bit unpalatable if it means impacting service in any way. You've asked all departments to come up with a 2.6 reduction in order to balance the budget for this coming year. How are we going to make that work when we see people waiting for those trains going by, and when we know that there's money that needs to be found for this budget?
We'll make it work as best we can, but the bottom line is, first of all, that $100 million plus have been invested in brand new money since I came to office in transit, in restoring bus lines and improving, adding trains to the Yonge Street subway and so on. Secondly, this exercise that we're going to go through of asking every single department, you can't start exempting and saying, well, we won't ask that department, we won't ask this one. You have to ask everybody, can you find 2.6% in efficiencies? And they will come back with an answer. And then we're not saying all those answers are automatically accepted. We're saying we're going to look at them. And obviously, I will be looking as one person to say, well, if the 2.6% coming from the TTC is all in things that are frankly not going to move the city's interests forward, then that's a judgment we have to make. But the notion that people should be able to say, well, we're just, you know, going to give up because we only got a quarter of the way there or halfway there, also isn't acceptable. So it's a process. It's a process that it's actually at its early stages, being done earlier in the year than ever before, and it's healthy, and it's necessary, and every family and every small business and every big business goes through the same thing every year, and we have to do the same. It's a $1.7 billion organization. So the notion that they can't find any efficiencies or that they shouldn't be able to doesn't wash with me or with them. They already found, I think, what, 75 million? So I'm just saying, work a little harder and see if you can find some more. And I think that's what they're now doing.
And you announced some investments in transit, including that children ride for free. That required a significant amount of money.
7 million.
And you're committing that that money will not be taken back, that we're going to commit to that investment moving forward?
I think that investment in children under 12 riding free is working, and it's working because kids are getting to get around the city more on the field trips. I've been told that by school boards and camps, and I've been told by families that it is helping them the way it was intended to help. So if you have a couple of kids and they had to go on transit every day to go to childcare or to go to the library or to school, that they're now saving that money, the family is, and those are often families that are struggling. And so it makes little sense to announce initiatives and then take them back a year later, especially if they're working. If they're not working, I'd say don't, cancel it. You know, it's not effective, cancel it. And there may be some things where we end up doing that, you know, because it's just not working, but the children under free, children 12 under 12 riding free, I think is working, and so it would be something that I'll be seeking to protect.
That takes us in actually to our first reader question. We had a question from Dan Weaver on Twitter, and he wanted to know what your plan is to fund Toronto's badly needed transit expansions, not the service, but the new work that we're talking about, including, he says, the TTC relief line.
Well, I have, first of all, we've been proceeding with work on the relief line because it's often thought that as we do Smart Track or we debate the Scarborough, Bloor-Danforth subway extension, that somehow Smart Track's being ignored. Smart Track, all the work is being done that needs to be done to keep it moving forward. I have said in the fall that we will bring forward a number of initiatives to the council, which has to approve them, to create the revenues that are needed to fund our share of those projects. When people cite the $29 billion, that number is before you take into account what will be contributions to many of these projects from the federal and or provincial governments. But we do have to raise our share, and it clearly can't come from money that is fully occupied now just running the city. So we're going to have some other revenue measures, and I've said that we're in a process of figuring out which ones are fair, which ones are effective, and that I will make some recommendations in that regard with my colleagues in the fall. And I'm going to do it because it's time we decided to be honest and say transit's not free, and that we're going to have to find a way to pay for it or just not build it. And I think 90% of the people in Toronto would say, no, we have to build it. So be straight up with us, tell us how much it's going to cost, be careful how you spend it, but we have to raise the money, and we're going to do that.
We're getting some new questions now, and still on transit, a reader on Twitter wants to know if you ride a bike or take transit to work.
I take transit to work. I won't say every single day because there are days when I'm going straight to Scarborough, and so it just doesn't work to be able to take transit out there for me to get to where I'm going, but I take transit almost every day to work, so the answer is yes. And I use the transit a lot. I used it last night when I was on my own. I mean, I use transit all the time. It's a great way to get around the city. I don't use it because I'm trying to make a point. I've always used it, and I continue to use it.
We're getting a lot of questions about the rail deck park, and it was also spurring a lot of attention on our site and on Twitter. And Kevin from Facebook just now wanted to know what are some ways we might look at funding a project of that size.
Well, if you look at what's been done elsewhere, first of all, people may not know that every time there's a development build, every time you see one of these new condo buildings, those people are required to make a mandatory contribution toward parkland. And the problem we have oftentimes, especially downtown, when you think about it, is, well, you can't just go out and sort of create parks out of land that's already occupied with all the buildings that are downtown. And so actually right now we have quite a lot of money that's been collected over time from developers who have built downtown, and we haven't made the parks or built the parks. And so some of it will come from there. Some will come from general revenues of the city in one form or another, whether it's even these new kinds of revenues we've talked about. And some, I hope, can come from what is increasingly a tool that's used, say in Chicago, we're in the Millennium Park, which is a very famous park on their waterfront, which actually partly is covered over rail lands. They actually went out and got private foundations and corporations to, as a public good, help finance this. So I'm sort of willing to look at the broadest picture, but bottom line is we'll find the money to pay for it, and a big chunk of it can come from people who built all the buildings, both actual and planned, around the very site of the park, as their residents will benefit and those property values will go up.
There's another question now from Facebook from Stephen Tufts, and he wants to know, what is the city doing to protect neighborhoods from rapid expansion of short-term rentals on platforms such as Airbnb?
I have said, you know, I'm looking very carefully at that, and I read with interest the article in today's Star about that, where you have 4 or 5 houses on a street downtown, and they're clearly sort of being used for, it would appear, for kind of a lot of parties and so on. I don't think that's the intention of I don't know what the intention of the landlord is, but certainly we can't have a situation arise in the city where you have the sort of frat parties, as it were, going on in what are otherwise very stable neighborhoods. And so I've just said we're keeping an eye on it because I think we can't react in a knee-jerk way to these kinds of changes in the way people go about their business and in developments like Uber and Airbnb. But I'm keeping a close eye on it, and reading articles like the one in the Star this morning informs me better of things that are going on in some cases. There are lots of other cases where people have flats and apartments that are being rented out in a totally normal way to tourists and so on. But we've got to keep an eye on it, and I am doing that, and I will be obviously working with staff and with my council colleagues to react if we have to, in terms of some of the kinds of regulations that you've seen in some other cities. But right now, I think it's too early to sort of say that there's some plan we have to do something specific about what we're seeing.
Council just went through a pretty difficult conversation about Uber. Do you think that that conversation on Airbnb, knowing that staff will be coming back and possibly making some recommendations about how to deal with that situation, could be just as difficult?
All of these are difficult. I mean, one thing I've learned in this job is that no matter what you do, there's somebody who's going to be upset, or somebody who thinks that that whatever resolution you find is not to their liking. But in this case, one of the things that's different is you had an existing industry that was being quite hurt by Uber and its emergence, namely the taxi industry. The hotel industry, as of yet, have not come to us to sort of say, look, this is really hurting our business. And so you don't have them out there as an actor in this yet. They may yet get there because the pace of change is increasing. But what you have here is residents who are the neighbors of houses that are being used for various purposes. You have the people who are renting the houses who like the money, and you have the users. And so it's a different issue. I don't think it has the potential to become as polarized, but that's assuming we can keep a handle on it. And that's why I say we're watching it carefully, but also not responding in a knee-jerk way to saying we're going to do this and it's going to be tomorrow morning.
So our team is telling me we're actually getting a lot of questions still about transit, in particular the Scarborough subway.
Sure.
They've sent me a question from Steve Donnelly, who posted on Facebook. It was actually one of the most liked questions, wanting to know why we're still committed to building the extension from the Bloor Danforth subway to the Scarborough Town Centre, asking about the capacity between an LRT and a subway, and wondering if this is a political scratch my back and I'll scratch yours deal to ensure council votes the right way on other projects.
The funny part of it is that we had a vote, and I'm glad that the writer referred to the vote, and the vote was quite decisive. It was actually a 2/3, 1/3 vote in favor of the subway extension. I think we have to accept the fact that there are those out there, including me, who believe that building a subway extension is the right long-term way to go, both to provide for the transportation needs, and it's part of a plan too, by the way. The plan consists of Smart Track and the subway extension, the express subway to Scarborough Town Centre, and an LRT that's going to cover a lot of neighborhoods in Scarborough. And that's part of a much broader plan for the entire city. And it's the first time we've really had a 15-year transit plan. And so I think we have to accept the fact that at some point in time you have to accept that a vote has been taken. There's no deal with anybody. We went around and just really sort of tried to sell the merits of what we believed was the right plan to the people, and 2/3 of them voted for this. And I think if we go on, it's perfectly legitimate to ask, well, why did we do that, or was that the right decision? But if we keep going on saying, well, we should have the decision again, because maybe it'll change next time, we'll never build any transit. We won't build either an LRT or a subway or a busway or anything. And I think we're past that time in the city of Toronto. I'm aware of the fact there was a vigorous debate. I'm used to that now because that's what happens. I'm used to the Star's editorial position, many of its readers, and many citizens on all sides of this. But I believe we've done the right long-term thing, and 25 years from now, people will not be debating what we did. They'll be thanking the people who were here for building transit, including the subway extension. And I just hope we can get on with actually doing it, including the LRT and Smart Track. All three will provide for much better service in the east of the city, where people have been very underserved for many years.
Both Mark and Dave on Facebook have a few questions about public safety and mental health when it comes to dealing with the police, and they want to know what is being done to improve that interaction with the public.
Well, the first thing I can say is that there's a huge emphasis being placed, and as a member of the Police Services Board, I know this, on making sure our people are better trained in de-escalation. And that has included a substantial chunk of totally new training, extra time put into training for police officers dealing specifically with mental health and de-escalation and matters like that. Part of the ongoing training of existing police officers has also been beefed up so that we're spending more time on training people better and having the best